Welcome to the Sanity podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host Rebecca Sugar, we speak to the people that you want to hear from.
Today we're joined by New York City Fire Commissioner Robert Tucker. Prior to his appointment as the city's 35th fire commissioner by Mayor Eric Adams, Commissioner Tucker ran a successful international security and investigations firm, T&M, and served on the board of the FDNY Foundation and as a trustee of the New York City Police Foundation, among his other philanthropic commitments. Commissioner Tucker is the father of three, a husband and grandson of the late Richard Tucker, an American operatic tenor and cantor, long associated with the Metropolitan Opera. So if the interview goes well, maybe you'll break into an aria, a little Puccini.
Let's see how it goes.
That'll be a first.
Fair enough.
If I could sing, Rebecca, I wouldn't be the fire commissioner.
You probably would, because I believe this is really your dream job. But maybe you'd be the singing fire commissioner. I wanted to start with just a general question. I just came back from Malibu, actually, this past week and saw the devastation that happened there from the fires. And that was really originally when we thought we need to talk to the commissioner here in New York City, because so much of it seemed, at least to the average outsider, avoidable. And I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of conditions on the ground that don't apply to us here from Malibu and the Palisades, right? They had the Santa Ana winds. They had underbrush that wasn't cleared away. We don't have those conditions here, but we have other conditions that complicate fire control here in our city. And I just wanted you to give us a general sense of what are we up against here in terms of fire management, and how is your department dealing with those challenges so that we don't end up in a situation like they had in California?
Got it. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. So regarding California, look, it's my opinion that climate change is real. And I think environmental disasters like that and flooding and other weather-related emergencies are going to become more a part of our life on the East Coast than it has been. And at the risk of sort of sounding the alarm, I would remind everyone that last fall, here in New York City, we had an off-the-charts amount of brush fires, something that we have never seen before in New York City, and they were in places we had never seen brush fires. So brush fires are not new to New York City. We have some brush fire apparatus, and we have dealt with them in Marine Park, in the Rockaways, in certain areas on Staten Island. But we never dealt with them in Prospect Park. We never dealt with them in Inwood Park. And last fall, we found ourselves dealing with brush fires to the point that we canceled lots of events that had fireworks permits, and it was a very dry spell for us. But nevertheless, we have the conditions set to have the type of problems that you're talking about. As it relates to California, first of all, thanks in large part to the generosity of the FDNY Foundation, I was able to send a delegation of fire chiefs during the fires, FDNY fire chiefs, out to California to be the guest of the LA County Fire Chief, who's a real friend of FDNY. And we watched how they tackled that problem. And we learned a lot. And, among the things we've learned is we need more equipment that is conducive to fighting brush fires. So anecdotally, we wear bunker gear in structural fires. We don't have brush fire bunker gear. We use structural fire hose to fight all fires in New York City. So we're lugging 80, 90.
Commissioner, just to interrupt you, so structural means meant for buildings or meant for a more urban environment? Okay.
Yeah, meant for buildings. So we don't have a lot of forestry hose line, which is different than structural fire hose line. So we've got to make some sort of mid-game adjustments. Look, our fire trucks can't fit into these parks, into these narrow roads in the parks. You've all been in parks. There are no fire hydrants accessible to us in Inwood Park. In fact, we drafted water from the Hudson River from one of our fire boats into the park, and that's the water we used to put the fire out, because there was no the stretch from the street hydrant into where the fire was in the park was just too long. So we're learning on the go, both by the experiences we're having here in New York City itself, which thank God we're not as serious as what Malibu and that area suffered from. But we're also not strangers to it. And the FDNY is the greatest fire department in the world. We are always ready, and we're adaptable. And I think that's what you saw last fall. And I think that everyone should rest assured that we're not going to have that type of problem that LA County suffered here in New York for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, and then I'll stop, is the way the water supply in New York comes to New York City, because it comes from reservoirs upstate. The altitude or the grade is much higher where it's coming from. And so it comes down to New York City much faster. But as I said, even if there were to be some catastrophic, emergency where our hydrants weren't working, we have lots of other ways, using our fire boats and the rivers on the East River and the canals throughout Brooklyn and other areas to draft water in for firefighting purposes.
I think that's really interesting, Commissioner. I think a lot of folks don't realize the prevalence of brush fires, and they think of New York as just an exclusively kind of concrete jungle. But in fact, there are lots of parks and are lots of open spaces, and share some features of that. Let me ask you about another thing you hear about popping up in the news every once in a while, sort of hard to make sense of, and that is kind of e-bikes and the fire hazards around lithium batteries, and just walking around the city, you certainly see a proliferation of e-bikes. I mean, is that a danger? Is that something you're monitoring or tracking? Or
we are at FDNY the leaders in the conversation nationally and internationally on lithium-ion battery safety and fires. I will admit that my predecessor did a very good job teeing that up, and we got close to getting federal legislation. And then at the last minute, in this sort of weird political moment, it was taken out of the bill that it was in, and we're still hoping there is national legislation around lithium-ion batteries.
And would that, sorry to interrupt, would that legislation be regulating them? What was in that?
What it really would do is, first of all, look, it doesn't make sense to have the laws we have in New York State and city when you can just go over the GW Bridge to New Jersey or up to Connecticut and buy them unregulated, or ordering them from Amazon or something like that. Now, our partners at Amazon and others have helped us with this effort. But if we had federal legislation, we could stop the importation of these non-UL certified batteries at the ports. That's where we really need to stop the whole importation of illegal, unsafe batteries. We're not naive. E-mobility devices are here to stay, and in fact, they're getting bigger and bigger and more utility. And we're not trying to prevent people from using them. What we're trying to prevent is structural fires that are caused because it's usually the replacement battery. The battery you buy the device with is usually UL certified, usually. But it's when you need a new battery, in some instances, people opt for the least expensive replacement. And that tends to be uncertified, unregulated, and unsafe.
How many fires a year are e-bikes and lithium batteries causing, as opposed to candles in the home or arson? Can you give us a sense of what the landscape of fires in the city looks like?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the number of e-bike started fires is growing. And the good news, though, is that while structural fires are increasing, deaths related to e-mobility device fires are down. In fact, this year to date, we only have one death associated with an e-bike fire. And while that sounds like a lot of progress from 6 and 23 and in the years past, one death is too many. And if it can be, if I won't stop talking about charging your e-mobility devices outside. Certainly don't put it near egress. Don't put it by the window. I mean, what we might think is basic is not basic. And so if you can charge and store your e-mobility device outside, that is our number one recommendation. And for your listeners, if they want to go to fdnysmart.org, we give lots and lots of safety tips, not just those around batteries.
What are the other major causes of fires besides
Electrical fires are our number one cause of fire. People are using extension cords and putting too many devices in the extension cord. People are there's faulty wiring. There's all sorts of electrical related fires that occur that can get big and out of control.
And just arson, how many arson calls on average are you getting a year?
Our fire marshals, is the group within the fire department responsible for investigating cause and origin, are really the best fire investigators around, and we get out to every multiple alarm fire. Arson is a thing, and it's there's arson for lots of different reasons. There's revenge, and there's property owners that are burning property. There's arson by mistake, where you're trying to burn something and it catches onto a building or something attached to the building. Arson is also down, but it's still a big thing, and we investigate every single fire in New York City as if someone started it until we understand how the fire was started.
Let me ask you about recruitment. There's been a lot of talk about, what makes for a great fireman and firewoman, how to think about diversity, how to think about gender. Give us a little bit of snapshot. Are your recruiting numbers where you'd like them to be? Is your force where you'd like it to be? How are you navigating some of the changing social and political considerations around, what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when we talk about recruiting at the fire department, we're not just talking about firefighters. We're talking about EMTs. We're talking about paramedics. We're talking about fire dispatchers. We're talking about fire prevention inspectors. This is a nearly 18,000 person public, all hazards public safety agency. And we've got a lot of cogs in the wheel that make us the greatest in the world. On the fire operations side, to answer your question specifically, people still want to be New York City firefighters, and our diversity numbers are getting better, and we've got lots of absolutely fabulous women firefighters in FDNY. In fact, I had the honor and privilege to promote to the rank of chief the first woman deputy chief in the fire department. And she is someone who I would like to see in the middle of the night if I was in a burning building and needed to be rescued. She's awesome, absolutely awesome. And many, many, many of the women that are firefighters in our firehouses are equally brave and awesome as well. There are certain things about our recruiting that are working very well. But But on the EMT and paramedic side, I'm nervous about it. And I have talked publicly about the crisis that is EMS. And it's not just our crisis, it's a national crisis. But there are less and less people who want to become EMTs in ambulances. And in our department, the majority of people who want to become EMTs want to do that so that they can promote over to the fire service after 4 years. And so just statistically, the next 1,500 or so New York City probationary firefighters are going to come from our ambulances. And probably behind that is 300 people or so that want to be EMTs. And that math isn't sophisticated. And that's why I've sounded the alarm that we've got a real crisis going on, because if the only people we can get to become EMTs and paramedics are people who are interested in going over to the fire operations side of the house, then we're going to have this 4-year turnaround and we're going to lose a lot of depth and experience.
Have you been thinking about drone technology and AI in terms of the future of managing fires?
Yeah, nonstop, actually. So here's the good news. FDNY launched its first drone in a fire in the Bronx in 2017. And so we are well into drone operations now. In fact, at every single working fire in New York City, second alarm or greater, we deploy our command tactical unit, which is a group of very highly skilled drone operator firefighters. And that unit sets up right in front of the fire building. And I would say that every single fire chief in New York City is looking for the drone capabilities in terms of thermal imaging, in terms of better viewing of shafts and the top of the fire building. From everything from a firefighting tactics point of view to firefighter safety, drones have transformed for us. And I'll say that, we've been in the air a long time because we have a protocol with our partners at NYPD to put a fire chief in a police helicopter during a structural fire. But today that's become less urgent for us. And the drone capability has become something that's routine and something that we are working on every day. In fact, we this week took delivery of 5 new, very sophisticated drones. So the answer is yes. On AI, the answer is also yes. I mean, I'm a buyer of AI. I think that there are things that AI can do to help us, particularly at the front end of our dispatch system. What ambulances go where, when, what fire trucks go where, when, and can help us more efficiently think about deployment and just how we take calls, the information we're getting from the caller on the call, how all of that gets processed as it relates to 25 years of data that we already have in the fire department about callers and where they're calling from and what they're calling about and what their condition is. The 911 system itself is pretty much the same as it's been for the last 50 years, 60 years. You pick up the phone, you dial 911, and a human on the other end answers. Like, the fact that it hasn't gotten like something new and sophisticated on our smartphones, there's definitely a calling and a need for 911 to become a lot more advanced. It's working really well. I mean, on the EMS side of the house alone, we handle over 1.6 million calls for service. And those are calls where we're taking you through. Tell me where the emergency is. What hurts? What happened? Who fell? What does it look like? Is he bleeding? Is she bleeding? Where's she bleeding from? There's a lot that goes into us processing that call, triaging that call, so that we can then decide what resources from FDNY need to be sent. And the problem we have at FDNY, and it's really a citywide problem now, is that too many people are calling 911 for things that aren't emergencies. And our ambulances just can't get to the scene fast enough because we're so tied up on boo-boos. And until we retrain the public that there are other options, and that FDNY EMS is not a car service and not a taxi, we're in a crisis.
Has 311 helped with that, or sort of some of these other information? Is that kind of the thing you're saying, or should people not just don't call at all, or call the hospital, or what?
I think I'm thinking about a lot of solutions. 311 works really well. People don't call it enough for the kinds of things they're calling. They're thinking to call 911 or 311. There's 988 for other mental health emergencies. But really, what I want people to do is understand that they can. We at 911 should be able to offload the call to telemedicine, and we have that capability. The problem is when we do it, people are so fixated that they want that ride to the hospital that the telemed ends up sending it back to us and we send an ambulance. And every time we respond to a playground where someone skinned their knee, we are not available to respond to the cardiac arrest and that person dies.
Right. Right.
Do you have any freedom to decide which calls you respond to with an ambulance and which you don't, or are you obligated to show up no matter what?
We're obligated to show up. Where I have some latitude is to prioritize the resources, which we call segmenting. So segment one is a cardiac arrest, stroke, choking, something that's absolutely life critical, and we segment all the way through 7. But we get a fair amount of flack for our response times on the EMS side, and that's because we don't have enough resources to address all of the needs of the people of New York City who in many instances don't require ambulances.
You mentioned the NYPD. Has anything surprised you, or what have you learned about working with the NYPD, the relationship between FDNY and the NYPD? I think a lot of us are kind of interested in that dynamic.
First of all, Jesse Tisch and I are good friends and have been long before we were both in these jobs. Tom Donlin, who was the interim police commissioner, and I knew each other for a long time back from when he was in the FBI. Eddie Caban and I knew each other very well because he was a police inspector that I knew in the NYPD. I have been working because I was a trustee of the NYPD Foundation for a long time. I've been working with the cops for a very long time and have nothing but the greatest respect for the NYPD as an organization and for the people who work there. What the relationship between the FDNY and the NYPD has never been better and more productive. And I think the best evidence of that is this horrible tragedy at 345 Park Avenue the other night, where the NYPD Special Response Group, SRG, and the rescue task force of the FDNY worked hand in glove searching that building. This is EMTs, paramedics, and firefighters in full ballistic vests searching with the police department, because had they come upon a victim who was still alive, it would be our paramedics who would provide the life-saving care. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case, and thankfully, this madman stopped his behavior before more people were mortally wounded.
Yeah. Commissioner Tucker, you were not a firefighter or a part of the fire department before you took this position. I just wondered, what have you discovered? I know you have been involved with the FDNY Foundation and have obviously known many members of the FDNY, but you haven't actually served in that capacity. What have you learned about firefighters since you've taken this job that you didn't know before, or what has surprised you?
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm not surprised to now realize these are the greatest human beings I've ever met. I have never, ever worked with people who are so willing to run towards danger when we're running away from it. And I know people talk about that, but witnessing it firsthand on the street when a building is on fire and watching our members go into the building to both rescue people and put the fire out is something like you've never ever seen before. But I will tell you, equally fun for me is sitting around the kitchen table at a firehouse and just having coffee and hanging out with firefighters. This morning I was at an EMS station in Brooklyn, central Brooklyn, and I had coffee there and had a fabulous talk with one of our EMS lieutenants that has been on the job a long time and had a fair amount of really interesting things to tell me about the job itself. The to a man or woman, these people come to work ready to serve the people of New York City, and they do it without a lot of fanfare. They do it without a lot of recognition. They do it without a lot of resources, and they do an awesome job.
I have a burning question I have to ask you.
No pun
Nope,
intended.
I was just
No
gonna
pun
say.
intended. Do firefighters like it when moms like me bring our, young children to the firehouses to sit in the truck and play with the lights, or do they really prefer we just stop doing that?
Oh no, I think they love it. And in several firehouses we have fire dogs, Dalmatians,
They're the best.
and lots of firehouses we give your dog a treat. And look, when the fire door is open, it's game on. We want the public to come in. There's also a time, during the course of the day where we drill and the senior fire fighters and fire officers, are teaching our younger firefighters about how to use the saw, how to do certain things tactically. And when that happens, the door is usually shut and we'd like to drill. But I think the answer to your question is we love meeting the public. We are part of your communities. We live in houses like you do on the block, and the firefighters welcome the visits and welcome the gratitude of the people like you who come by.
We're not gonna ask you about politics, but I think one question I have is, we're in the heat of an election season here in New York. People have lots of opinions, obviously. From your behind the scenes view, and this dovetails maybe a little bit with what you just said, Commissioner, is the city working? Should people be sort of satisfied with the kind of the behind the curtain? Is this a city that is things are working, competent people are making decisions? You mentioned the sort of virtues of the firemen, but at kind of a bigger level, should people feel optimistic about the city?
Well, I live in the city. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I think the answer to your question is yes, and I actually think it's working far better than people are giving it credit for. Crime is at an all-time low. Um, I think the streets are relatively clean from a sanitation perspective. Lots and lots of new rules have been implemented about how people store garbage out on the street. I think, restaurants are jam-packed, hotels are occupied. You can't get theater tickets anymore these days. I think the city is in far, far better shape than I think the public is acknowledging. And I don't know, what do you think? I mean, look, I'm a senior executive in government. I think it's working really, really well, and people should feel very confident about where New York City is right now. But maybe I'd turn the question around, and you both, I don't know where you live, but Rebecca, what do you think?
I think as a woman walking the streets and somebody with two young children, I worry about crime a lot, and the subways in particular. And I always feel, though, Ari's question is so interesting because what does it mean for a city to work? And that's one of the critical questions in the upcoming mayoral election. In spite of all the other conversations around politics and views on different issues, there's just the basic issue of who can actually run this very complicated and diverse city, who has the competence to do that, the skill set.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I want to tell you something. And I started and ran a business for 25 years that went well. That's still running without me, which hurts my feelings. It's running better. It's running better without me than it was with me. But
I hope that's not true of the FDNY once you're done.
Yeah.
well, me too. But what I will say, and I think this is really important for people to understand, these are super hard jobs if you do them well. If you tackle the big issues, if you manage like a CEO, and that's how I came from T&M to FDNY. I was the CEO of that business for a long time, and I came here and brought my CEO skills. If you do it and you really dig in and you manage all of the administrative aspects of it, the way I have, it's a big business. It's a $3 billion budget. It's 18,000 people. We bill for services at EMS. There, we have a huge fleet. We buy gasoline and we buy car parts, and this is a very, very big business, forgetting about the gravity of our mission. There's a lot going on here, and I don't think you can underestimate the talent that are serving in jobs like, forget me, far more talented people. Jesse at police, Jimmy Otto at the Department of Buildings. I mean, these are some of them. They could go on and leave and run big public companies, and instead they're here doing the job now. And I think the city's working better today than it has been working in a very, very long time. And it doesn't take much for the proverbial to hit the fan, and then it takes a long time to fix it.
So maybe we could end with that sort of question. Whoever the next mayor is, what's one thing that person could do to make your department work better? And maybe one thing that they could do that would really jeopardize the work that you're doing or hinder it in a significant way that you hope they won't do?
Yeah. Well, look, the most important job of the mayor is to attract very talented, committed people to run the agencies. Full stop. That's the most important job the mayor has. And you've got to get someone in City Hall that can do that. That's Rolodex is large enough to be able to fill these jobs with highly talented people who are willing to take, a break from what they're doing in life and come over and when I say this is a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job, I'm not kidding. This thing is going all day and night, and things are happening all day and night in the 5 boroughs of New York City, and I'm in charge of it. And I take that responsibility, very seriously, and it's very heavy. What's going on in FDNY is life or death, and it's that simple. I think it's going very well. I think the members, if it doesn't really matter what I think, what I really think matters is how the department is operating. And I think the department is operating, we've put a very solid team together to manage the department, both on the civilian staff and in the uniform staff. And I think it's going very well. And, we have a big strategic plan with a lot of initiatives that I think need to be undertaken. And whoever the mayor is in January should allow the fire commissioner to continue down the path with this strategic plan.
Great. Commissioner Tucker, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it also. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Great.
Bye.